Hello, folks, and welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. I am your host and beat reporter, and I have been your beat reporter, covering the Jacksonville Jaguars for On SI every single day since August 2019, and we continue to move forward through yet another season together. As always, you can find our 100% free, 24/7, boots-on-the-ground Jaguars content every single day on social media such as Facebook and Twitter when you follow us at Jaguars on SI. You can also find us at www.si.com/NFL/Jaguars. Alright, folks, welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. I am your host and beat reporter. And today we are talking about the significance of the Jaguars' major win against the Los Angeles Chargers. Like I told you guys, I wasn't afraid to eat crow. I predicted the Jaguars would lose big, and they came out and played the best game of the Liam Cohen era. A truly dominant game. Didn't allow the Chargers to find the end zone. Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman, offensively, the Chargers struggled mightily. Jim Harbaugh made the call to pull Justin Herbert while the game was still going. Putting Trey Lance in for the last several drives. You don't often see NFL teams just kind of wave the white flag like that, but as we kind of saw with the Jaden Daniels situation several weeks ago, the Chargers went ahead and were proactive to make sure that didn't happen. The Jaguars, it was truly a win that, to me, kept their playoff hopes alive. It's not like a loss would have meant that they were out of the running. No, they would have to keep pace pretty much with the Kansas City Chiefs for the rest of the year. And that is a pretty big challenge in of itself. Thanks to the win, the Jaguars have kind of really put themselves in position to where if they win on Sunday against the Arizona Cardinals, they already dictate and decide their own future to begin with. But if they beat the Cardinals, they're in a great position. And they go from the 7th seed to the 6th seed. Because they would have the same 7-4 record as the Chargers if they beat Arizona and the Cardinals this Sunday. But they would get the tiebreaker head-to-head in front of them, which really puts them a half game ahead of the Chargers. And that's why, even though they're just one game ahead of the 5-5 Chiefs in the standings, they're really 1.5 games ahead of them because of that head-to-head tiebreaker. So, the Jaguars, ultimately could have been in a situation where had they lost this game in Week 11, had they continued to take a step backward after that loss in Houston, you'd be asking a lot of questions. And instead, I think maybe what needs to be talked about is how I understand the record is 1-1 in the last 2 weeks. There is no moral victory to take away from the Houston Texans game. They were up by 19 points on a divisional opponent who at the time had a losing record, and there was about 13 minutes left in the game while playing a backup quarterback. There's no moral victory to take from that. But what I will say is the fact that the Jaguars were able to put themselves in a position where you can say they had the worst quarter of the Liam Cohen era in Houston. I agree with that absolutely. That fourth quarter was the worst quarter. Otherwise, and this will sound like maybe some copium, maybe sunshine pumping. I understand that. It's not my intent. So I feel like I normally kind of tell it how it is and how I actually feel. But they've played 7 of their 8 best quarters of football in the last 2 weeks. First 3 quarters against Houston and those 4 quarters against Los Angeles were the best 7 quarters of the Liam Cohen era so far. I mean, it's not even close either. I mean, you put those together, and the Jaguars are outscoring their opponents, 48-0? In those 7 quarters? And they're outscored 9-0 in that 1 quarter against 19-0 in that 1 quarter at Houston. That's what makes a difference between them being 7-3 and in a really good spot to 6-4 and just in a relatively good spot. But I will say for, the preseason expectations, I think that's a heck of a spot for the Jaguars to be in. I understand how they've gotten here has created quite a few emotions. It's been a very up and down, inconsistent team. Very impressive highs. I mean, that Monday Night Football win against the Kansas City Chiefs, as electric of an atmosphere as I've ever felt covering the team. And I've covered every game, home game at the very least, in person, but one or two since the 2019 season. I missed one or two, I can't remember how many, in the COVID season. So, I don't know how many games that is. Honestly, I should put together, keep a running record for what the games are that I've attended. But that game, the Chargers game, and the Titans game are the three I have felt just the most electrified of a stadium. Just three games that absolutely show that this is a fan base and a city that cares. And that simply put, if you put a good product of football in front of them, you will get a great home field advantage. The Jaguars put out a great product against the Chargers, and it very well could mean more and more meaningful games for the Jaguars at home moving forward. I mean, they play an Arizona team on Sunday that is in a really weird spot. Jacoby Brissett just threw for, 450-something yards? And what was nearly a 20-point loss to the San Francisco 49ers. Kyler Murray obviously isn't playing, so you're playing I count a guy as a backup quarterback as somebody who was not the week one starter, and it wasn't the case where they were a rookie in waiting. So, if a guy was a 7th-round rookie, then yeah, I count him as a backup quarterback. But, if they had played Jackson Dart, I don't think I would have counted that as necessarily a game against a backup quarterback. But I consider this one. I mean, they entered the season with Kyler Murray as their starter. In a very similar situation in a lot of ways to the Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence. It just seems like the Cardinals, took that step to add the backup quarterback with starter experience so you can potentially turn to. I know, obviously, Kyler Murray has the injury. But it's a very, simply put, strange year for that organization. And it's a game where I believe the Jaguars are the better team. And we'll obviously talk about this throughout the week. But a situation where as long as the Jaguars, I feel like, do what they're supposed to do and what they're capable of, they have a good chance to this time next week we're talking about them as the 6th seed in the AFC. With a leg up on the Chiefs. On the Chargers. It's not to say they have an easy schedule moving forward. I mean, they definitely have a couple games. The Cardinals aren't what I would call an overly difficult or impressive team, whatever you want to call it. Obviously, they still have to play the Titans twice. They get the New York Jets, and it seems like probably, who knows what quarterback will be at that point, but Tyrod Taylor, Justin Fields, whatever you want to call it. But they still, of course, have 2 games against the Colts. And they still have to play the Broncos. They're 3-0 against the AFC West right now. That Broncos game and the Colts games are certainly looking like the toughest games left on their schedule. I'd say that Broncos game, especially. But at the end of the day, this is a Jaguars team that, really encouraging highs and then maddening lows. But they've shown that they more or less can play with anybody they're playing. I mean, they lost Seattle 20-12, but they were in that game the whole time. The only game that they really were not in at any point this year was the Los Angeles Rams game, which that game was just a complete debacle from top to bottom, start to finish, whatever you want to call it. But otherwise, the Jaguars have put themselves in a nice position at 5, more weeks until they come down to a pivotal stretch, where of course they'll play a couple more divisional games to end the year. But the Jaguars, quite frankly, in the first year that Liam Cohen, James Godson, and Tony Boselli have surpassed my expectations for them. And like I said, I eat crow for not giving them enough of a shot against the Chargers, but they definitely made me eat my words. It was the best game, I think, of the Liam Cohen era, and we're hitting that important stretch in the season, so we'll see how they do over these next 2 months. Thank you guys for listening to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. Be back next time.